All right, everybody. So here's something that happens to almost every homeowner somewhere in the middle of the design process. You're sitting there looking at your plans. Maybe you've been in design for a few months, maybe longer, and this thought kind of creeps in. Are we still on track? Like, do we actually know what this thing is going to cost? Or are we just hoping and praying that it's going to come out in the end? Now, here's what I want you to understand. That feeling, that anxiety, that quiet worry that you might get to the end of the design and the number that comes back is going to knock you off your feet. That's one of the most common experiences in this entire process. I've seen it 100 times. And the frustrating part is that most homeowners don't know there's actually a system for this, a way to stay in control of your costs at every stage of design before you ever get to that final contract number. Today, we're going to fix that. We're going to talk about two specific tools, the budget checkpoint and the formal estimate. And I'm going to show you exactly which one applies to your situation right now and when to use it. And I'm also going to give you a simple 2-question decision framework that tells you your next move, no matter where you are in the process. By the end of this episode, you're going to have real clarity and you're going to know what to do next. All right, let me start with something that I think is going to reframe how you think about your project costs, because most homeowners think of knowing what their project costs as a yes or a no. Either you know or you don't, but that's not how it actually works. Cost clarity is a spectrum, and you move along it as your design progresses. Let me walk you through the 4 stages. Stage 1, the gut feeling. This is where almost every homeowner starts. You've got a number in your head. Maybe it came from a neighbor, maybe from something you read online, maybe from a contractor you talked to at a party 3 years ago. It's a number that feels comfortable, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with your actual project. Stage 2, the informed budget. This is the budget you establish through the discovery process, cost per square foot ranges, comparable projects, some real data from the market. It's more grounded than that gut feeling, but it's still really kind of hypothetical. It's based on general assumptions, not your specific design, not your specific site, not your specific selections. A budget tells you what you hope it costs. Stage 3, the budget checkpoint. This is where things start getting real. The budget checkpoint is a validation step. You're taking your design at whatever stage it's at to a qualified contractor and asking them to pressure test your budget against what they're seeing in the plans. It's not a formal estimate, but it's the first time a professional is looking at your actual project and giving you meaningful feedback on cost. And then stage 4, the formal estimate. This is a contractor-priced, plan-based, real number. It's based on your completed or substantially completed plans and specifications. This is the number you can actually make decisions from. This is what it really costs. Here's the line I want you to hold on to. A budget is what you hope it costs. An estimate is what it actually really costs. Those are 2 different numbers, and knowing the difference changes everything about how you manage your project. You may recall in some of the past episodes, I did way back in the beginning of this episode. And by the way, I'm on episode 51 today, and next week will be episode 52, which is kind of like my 1-year anniversary of doing a podcast, and I'll be reevaluating everything to decide if I should continue on. I'm watching the numbers, and things are just really, really going. I think I had twice as many listeners this month as last month, and so on. But remember going back to the early stages of the podcast, and I talked about the discovery series, and part of that was the budgeting process. And I even talked about it being an investment goal. And before you even begin your design, you're going to establish your investment goal, how much you want to put into this property. And then the budgeting exercise is kind of the next step from there, where you're actually using real life data in order to do some preliminary costing of a project that you may have in early design. And that's a really important step for you to take as you're working with your design team. And we're going to dive into that today and talk about that, because we're going to take your what I just mentioned a minute ago, this number you pull out of the air or that you think it should cost, or because your neighbor spent that much or your friend spent that much, and how we take that investment goal and then we translate that into an actual budget. So the BuildQuest tool that I'm developing is going to actually do some budgeting exercises for you from some real market rate data and based on your real project. That's getting really exciting as I'm testing that right now. So we're going to get into these budget checkpoints and actual estimates. Now, in the previous episode, I talked about estimates and what the definition of that really is. An estimate is something that comes from an actual construction professional, and that eventually converts into a proposal or a quote that becomes more formal as you step along the process. And we're going to talk about that today. So now, here's what I see all the time. A homeowner goes through months of design, schematic design, design development, all of it. And they really never advance past stage 1 or stage 2. And you may remember in the past episodes where I talked about the design process and the design steps with schematic design, design development, and construction documents. You're going to hear me talking about that again today, about how we time budget checkpoints and actual real estimates within the design step process, not after you're 100% complete with the design and engineering and construction documents, because if you'd wait too late, you're no longer in the driver's seat to be able to make informed decisions. So that's a big part of what this episode is today. It's to make sure that you are still in the driver's seat. You're not running behind the wagon trying to catch up as the horses are taking off. You're actually still holding the reins. So that's what we're going to really dig into today. So a lot of homeowners, they're making decisions based on that original gut feeling number, and they have no idea whether the design is tracking to that number or blowing right past it. And even worse, if you didn't share that investment goal, that number in your head with your design team, all the more reason you're going to get blown away and surprised. And so will your design professional if they haven't asked, and don't necessarily depend on them to ask you. It's kind of your responsibility to share that. So, you hit the end of the design process, they call a contractor, and the number that comes back in is a gut punch. Happens probably more often than not, and it may have happened to you, or it's happened to some of your friends. So now you're faced with a choice: redesign, which costs money, or push through over budget. Either way, you're in a painful position that a little cost validation during design would have prevented entirely. The good news, there is a system for this, and it's not necessarily a well-documented system or a process. It's something that is kind of something I've done with clientele for many, many decades, or for several decades. And it's not anything complicated, but it's something that you should be aware of so that you can implement. And it starts with understanding the 2 tools available to you during the design process. Let's start with the first one, the budget checkpoint. All right, the budget checkpoint. And I want to start by being really clear about what this is and what it isn't, because both of those things matter a lot. A budget checkpoint is a cost validation exercise. It's a moment during the design process where you stop, take stock of where you are, and ask questions. Based on what we have right now, are we still in the ballpark? Is a good example. It's not a formal estimate, doesn't require complete plans or finished specifications. What it does require is enough design information for a qualified contractor or builder to look at what you're proposing and giving you a meaningful range. So think about this. This is way more than your neighbor saying, well, I did my job for $100 a square foot, or you talking to a builder, years ago, or even recently, where they give you some kind of range of budget, but they've never seen anything of what you want on your project. And this is why during the early stages of design, you can use a budget checkpoint. And so a budget checkpoint gives you a cost range, not a locked-in number. It's based on square footage, the scope of work, the general complexity, and the contractor's experience with similar projects. It's directional. It tells you whether you're in the right zip code financially, not the exact address, right? So a budget checkpoint isn't a price, it's a sanity check. And sometimes a sanity check is exactly what you need. There are two natural moments in the design process for a budget checkpoint. The first is at the end of schematic design, after you've looked at your design options, selected a direction, and have a general sense of what you're building. If you go all the way back into one of the episodes about the design process, you'll learn that the schematic design step is the very first step in design where you are taking all of your ideas and your wants and needs and wishes and dreams, and your designers are interpreting all of that and providing concepts to you. And you work with them back and forth and iterate till you get to a point where you all kind of sit back and go, yeah, it's pretty close. That's the pause point I'm talking about. And at this stage, your plans are still relatively rough. You have a concept, maybe some floor plan layouts, a general sense of size and scope, but you haven't gotten into detailed specifications yet. Materials, finishes, systems, most of that is actually still undecided. What you're doing with checkpoint number one is taking those rough plans to a qualified contractor and asking, hey, based on what you're seeing here and your experience with a project like this, are we in the right range? A really good contractor can actually give you that. It's experience based, it's directional, and it might save you from going deeper into design on a project that's already out of alignment with your budget. Think of it like getting a rough appraisal on a house before you commit to buying it. It's not the full inspection, but it tells you whether it's worth going further. And keep in mind that as you're working with your design professional, and hopefully you're working with a qualified architect to design your home, or a certified interior designer to work on your remodel, or both. A lot of them have working relationships with contractors, and you're going to find, I'm going to be talking about that later in this episode, but this is how you're able to accomplish a couple things at the same time, is qualifying contractors and getting preliminary estimates. And also, if you work with a contractor that has been a reference or referral or reference from your architect, they're usually a little bit more willing to provide any kind of preliminary analysis for you, as opposed to finding somebody out of the blue that doesn't know you, doesn't know your architect. It might be a little bit more difficult to find somebody to actually do that. So keep that in mind when you're talking with your architect. All right, checkpoint number two, and this is after the design development. So the second checkpoint comes at the end of design development, and this one is significantly more powerful and more reliable than the first. And here's why. So by the end of the design development, you have approximately 90% of your material specified. Your structural engineering is substantially complete. Your design team has locked in most of the major decisions. You really have real data to work with, not just a concept. So when you take that to a contractor, they're not just working from experience and gut feel anymore. They're looking at actual plans, actual specifications, actual scope. The range they give you is tighter, more dependable, and much closer to what a formal estimate would produce. So now that said, back in the schematic design stage, you do have schematic drawings done, but you just haven't got to the level of, for example, specifying all the window product and the door product and all of the materials that go inside, the exterior finishes, the interior finishes, the level of complexity when it comes to the site conditions and the utility locations, and how much site work is going to be needed for the property. So visualize yourself standing on your parcel or at your home where you're planning to remodel with the schematic level design in your hand, saying, look, this is conceptually what we're looking for. We want to build a 4,000 square foot house on this little hillside lot. It's 2-story, it's 5 bedrooms. I want a separate garage. I want this, I want this, I want that. The contractor can look at that. A qualified contractor who's built many homes in your neighborhood is going to look at that, and they're going to ask you, how much did you think you want to spend? And you're going to ask them, how much do you think I should spend? And that's how you're going to compare it. You don't have to necessarily give up what you think you wanted to invest. Get a sense for, don't let what you thought influence what they say, and get a good kind of gut feel. The good guys can just give you gut feel pricing, and the real good ones sometimes aren't very far off when you get to the final end. So, and this is the moment during the design development that I want to be direct about this, where a lot of homeowners discover they need to make some tough choices. So the design development stage is the stage after schematic. That's where everything's hammered out, but it's before final working drawings and documents or permits and everything are worked on and paid for. So this is where this is like the biggest milestone if you were to stop at the end of design development. Yes, you have a lot more time and money invested in design, but you're not all the way there. So this is the chance for you to make some decisions, still stay in that driver's seat so that you're not getting pulled around by design professionals, by contractors that end up waking up one day realizing that you're, 40% over budget. So you might be starting, you might be thinking like, well, maybe the Master Suite edition gets phased for later, or maybe some high-end finishes get swapped out for something more reasonable. Finding that out now at checkpoint number 2 is infinitely better than finding it out after you've spent money to complete your construction documents. So the limitation of a checkpoint, and here's what I want you to understand, budget checkpoints are genuinely valuable, but they have a ceiling, right? A checkpoint is still based on assumptions. The contractor is making educated judgments based on experience and current market conditions. It's better than nothing, far better than just hoping, but it's not a locked number. And there are situations where a checkpoint isn't enough. If you have a serious budget concerns that can't wait, if you're wondering whether this project is even viable, you may need to go beyond a checkpoint and pull a contractor in for a more formal preliminary estimate even before your plans are fully complete. Which brings us to the next question. When are your plans ready for a real estimate? That's exactly what we're going to talk about. So here's where it gets really practical. At some point during design, usually toward the end of design development, you hit a fork in the road. The question is, are you ready for a formal estimate, or do you still need to do a budget checkpoint first? I see homeowners get this wrong all the time in both directions. Some push toward a formal estimate before their plans are anywhere near ready. They get incomplete numbers back, numbers full of assumptions and contingencies, and they can't make sense of them. The bids vary wildly. They don't know what to trust. Other homeowners do checkpoint after checkpoint, never committing to the formal estimate. They delay so long, they're suddenly at the end of construction documents, wondering why they never got an early reality check. The right answer? Neither of them. The right answer is understanding what ready actually means and making the call based on that. Not on comfort level, not on anxiety, on the actual state of your plans. Ready for a formal estimate isn't about having perfect plans. It's about having enough information that a contractor can price your project without making too many assumptions. 3 variables determine whether you're there. Variable 1, size, scale, and complexity. A straightforward kitchen remodel and a new custom home have completely different readiness thresholds. Simpler projects can go to a formal estimate earlier with less complex plans. Complex projects, large addition, new construction, significant structural work need more detail before a contractor can give you a reliable. Variable 2, plan and specification completeness. You've heard me say this a million times throughout this podcast. And this is the number one deal. And it's not just about having drawings. It's about whether those drawings combined with your specifications contain enough information for a contractor to price the job. Are your major material selections made? Is your scope of work documented? Has structural engineering been addressed? If there are still large areas of TBDs in your plans and specs, you're not really ready for a formal estimate yet. Variable 3, design stage. Where are you in the design process? Are you at the end of the design development of design step 2 or finishing construction documents step 3? That matters, and it leads us right into 2 estimating windows, which I'll cover in the next segment. So here's the line I want you to take from this segment. Ready isn't a feeling, ready is a condition, and your plans either meet it or they don't. Take an honest look right now, not optimistic, honest. If your specifications aren't documented, if your engineer hasn't reviewed the structural elements, if there are still major finish selections sitting at TBD, you are not as far along as you think. And that's okay. Knowing that is valuable. It tells you which tool to reach for. If your plans are substantially complete, your major decisions are made, and your design team has done the heavy lifting, you may be ready to move past that checkpoint and into the estimating process. So either answer is a good answer because both answers come with a clear next step. And that's the whole point of having a framework. All right, so you've assessed where you are. You've determined your plans are ready or close to ready for a formal estimate. Well, hold on. How do you know that? Do you really know that if you've never done a project before? This is where your design professional comes into play. But I want you to think about it just more of a common sense standpoint. Like, are you able to tell your contractor the type of flooring you want, the type of cabinetry you want, the type of countertops you want? Has the architect provided enough information, such as the structural engineering plans that usually come from an outside consultant? Has the electrical, lighting, and mechanical plan been completed? Has all the stone and the siding and the windows and the skylights and the roofing material, has all of that been specified? Is the scope of work been defined? In previous episodes, I talked about scope of work. And scope of work, think about scope of work as the narrative, right? If you're doing a remodel project, especially, you have to write a narrative about what you want in each construction category. And we're going to be talking about construction categories in the next episode about how to organize an estimate so that you can be able to compare quotes from one contractor to the next. So between yourself and your common sense, talking with a contractor, listening to their questions, and having your design professional along your side, you should be able to figure out if you have enough information to be able to obtain either a budget checkpoint or an actual hard cost estimate. So we're going to be talking about two estimating windows that you have, estimating now during the process, not budget checkpoints, actual obtaining estimates, because there are two specific moments in the design process where going after a real contractor number makes sense, and which one applies to you depends on really where you are. So window one, this is at the end of the design development process, like I just talked about. At this point, your plans are substantially complete. Most of your major decisions have been made, and your design is locked in well enough that a contractor can give you a meaningful number. Window one is especially well suited for simpler projects, remodels where no new space is being added, kitchen and bath projects, straightforward small additions. For these projects, the plans at the end of the design development contain enough information to support a reliable estimate. For larger or more complex projects, custom homes, significant additions, you can still pursue an estimate at window one, but with one important caveat that number may shift somewhat once construction documents are complete, which is design step 3. There are still details being finalized. So the estimate at window one for a complex project is directional and reliable, but not fully locked. So here's what I love about window one. If the estimate comes back and you're over budget, you still have the ability to adjust before the design is finalized. You can change scope, defer portions of the project, swap out material specs, all before those decisions are permanently locked into your construction documents. That flexibility has real value. And there's a bonus. Initiating the estimating process at window one naturally kicks off your contractor's search at the same time. So you're getting a price and beginning to evaluate who you want to build with. So it's kind of like two things for the price of one. Now, it's very, very easy to skip this process because what's happening in real life, in real time here, the energy is flowing, the design is progressing. You as a homeowner are sitting with your architect looking at all of these new design presentations, 3D renderings. You have material samples all around you. Your interior designer is excited, showing you drawings and renderings of your fireplace and your kitchen and your primary bathroom, and your architect's showing you the new pool and the pool house and the exterior views. It's really easy to just blow right through what I'm talking about today because you're so excited. And this is what happens, is the excitement overtakes everything, and it's just going to be up to you to decide how important the budget of the project is, because you're going to slowly decide as plans and designs are being presented to you, what is the value of these? I mean, once you start to see the possibilities, you're going to determine, wow, this is really cool. I think I want to pay for this. Or I'm not seeing it. I don't get the sense. I don't understand what this is. I don't understand how much it costs, why it costs so much. So you're going to be able to pick up on that as you're getting design presentations to you. But I just want to caution you to not just blow right past this. You have to make your own decision whether you think you should just stop and pause because you're nervous about it, because all these great ideas look amazing, but God, now I'm scared. How much is it going to cost? Or if you're in a financial position where I think I'm just going to go for it, it's up to you. But that's the idea here, is to expose this for you so that you can make some informed decisions that not a lot of people are telling you. So window 2. Now, this is at the end of construction documents and is often the most often is how should I say it? It's the most often time people actually formally go out and get estimates, right? So window 2 is at the end of step 3, construction documents. So this really is the official, most accurate time to obtain a formal estimate. Your design is finished, your plans are complete, your specifications are locked. Everything a contractor needs to price your project is on paper. So when a contractor gets a complete, thorough set of construction documents, they can build the project in their mind. They can quantify it, price it, and give you a number you can actually rely on. Window 2 is like the gold standard. You're pricing the finished product, not an assumption. So the trade-off with window 2 is that your design is done. If the number comes back too high and you want to make changes, those changes now cost money. Your design team needs to revise, re-specify, potentially even re-engineer the project. And that's why the budget checkpoint process at window 1 exists, to catch problems before you get to this point. For complex projects, there's a practical middle ground worth knowing about. Rather than waiting until construction documents are 100% complete, you can initiate the estimating process when they're substantially but not fully done, maybe 85 or 90% complete. This gives contractors enough detail to price with high accuracy while preserving a window for you to make final adjustments before everything is locked. Not too early, not fully committed, just right for the complexity of the project. So I want to caution you on a couple things here, or make you aware of a couple things. If you go out and start engaging with contractors and the window 2, which is the construction documents, or window 1, which is during the design development, step 2, there's an added benefit here is as you're qualifying your contractors during this process, the good ones are going to be reading your plans, interpreting them, and coming up with a list of questions in order for them to price it properly. And this is one of the very first ways that you can qualify a contractor to see if they truly are vested in the project, if they care enough to ask questions. And then these questions can be routed back to your design professional, you and your design professional, to make any of the open-ended decisions, things that they've learned that aren't listed, aren't specified, aren't clear on the drawings. So this just kind of acts like a quality assurance checkpoint for the design plans. One thing I want to talk about also with this is you have to be careful with your design pro. A lot of times they will lean too heavily on the contractor to do all their work for them. So if you're seeing a ton of questions come in about what seems basic, like how am I going to build this, or what goes here, or how's that hang up there, be aware, because that's probably a sign that your architect does not have the plans far enough along to be able to accomplish these window 1s or window 2s, especially if you're in window 2, the construction documents, because that means that they've generated a mediocre set of plan specifications, and now you're open up for more change orders and more surprises. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're going through these 2 different window budget checkpoints and estimating process, and pay attention to what's coming back from the questions that the contractors are asking. So that's the 2 windows. Window 1, end of design development. Great for simpler projects and early course correction. Window 2, end of construction documents, the gold standard, your most accurate number. So now let's put all this together in something that you can use immediately. All right, so everything we've covered today, the spectrum, the budget checkpoint, the decision point, the 2 windows, it only matters if you use it. So let's make this real practical. Let's talk about exactly what to do with it. Before anything else, I want you to answer one question honestly. Where am I in the design process right now? Not where you think you should be, not where you hope to be by now, where you actually are, because a lot of homeowners overestimate their progress. If your specifications aren't documented, if your engineer hasn't reviewed the structural elements, if there are still major finish selections sitting at TBD, you are not as far along as you think you are, and that's okay. Knowing that is valuable. It just tells you which tool to reach for. So the 2-question decision tree here. Once you've done that honest assessment, run through 2 questions. Question 1, are my plans and specifications substantially complete? You may not know the answer to that, but you can certainly pose that question to your design pro and try to make an informed decision. But if yes, you may be ready for a formal estimate. Move to question 2. If no, a budget checkpoint is your tool right now. Take your current plans to a qualified contractor for a validation conversation. Get their honest read on whether you're in the range and focus on getting your specs more complete before pursuing, a formal estimate. Question 2, do I have serious budget concerns that can't wait? If yes, don't wait for a full plan completion. Bring a contractor in now for a preliminary cost consultation alongside your design team. Get directional data sooner rather than later. This is your version of pulling the estimating process forward. If no, follow the appropriate estimating window. Simpler project. Plans substantially complete. Window 1, end of design development. Complex project or new construction, window 2, end of construction documents. That's it. 2 questions, clear path forward from every answer. No guessing, no anxiety, and no framework. So now what I want to talk to you about is a behavioral shift for a second, because this is really what this episode is about underneath all of the frameworks. The passive homeowner waits. They wait for the design to be done. They wait for the contractor to tell them what it costs. They receive information rather than seeking it. And somewhere along the way, they lose control of the outcome. The active homeowner, the awakened homeowner, uses these tools intentionally. They know where they are in the process. They know which tool applies. They're having cost conversations with their design team and a contractor candidates throughout the design, not just at the end. They arrive at the estimates ready for it, not surprised by it. The homeowner who stays passive through the design is the homeowner who gets surprised at the end, and the one who takes control, they never are. But I want to spend just a moment on what happens when you skip both tools entirely. When you go through the entire design process with no cost validation, no checkpoint, no early estimate, and you arrive at the end of construction documents with a contractor for the first time, the numbers come back, it's 30% over your budget. Now what? Redesign costs money, and it can cost a lot of money. Your design team has to revise the plans that are already complete, re-specify, potentially re-engineer. That's real dollars on top of what you've already spent. That could be the cost of all of your appliances. Who knows, $30,000 appliance package for your high-end custom home, or maybe even more. You could end up, spending all of that redesigning or not getting the appliances that you want, just as a high-level example. And your leverage with your contractor is kind of gone because you're already at the end of the process. The budget checkpoint and the estimating windows exist to make sure that moment really never happens to you. They're not extra steps, they're protection. And here's what I want you to do. One thing this week, have a conversation with your architect or designer if you've already begun the process about where you are in the process. Ask them directly, based on where we are right now, Are we ready for a budget checkpoint, or do we have enough to initiate a formal estimate? Get their honest read, and then use this decision tree from this episode to decide what your next move is. And here's another thing. For those of you who haven't even started a project yet, you're probably in the best position by gaining this knowledge now, because you can, even before you hire an architect, as part of your qualifying process with an architect, you can have all the fun and games talking about the design of the project and all these things that you want and all these inspiration images that you have. But open up the conversation about how they handle the budget, how they manage the budget checkpoints. Are there any checkpoints that we go through in your design process to understand if I'm on budget for my project, or how do you handle that? Do you have contractors that you work with? So these are some really powerful tidbits for you to be able to both qualify your architect and then understand their process. Because if an architect stammers around about dealing with a budget, you might be in a bad spot before or after you've hired them. All right. Okay, let's pull this car into the garage. Here's what we've covered today. Cost clarity is a spectrum, and you have two tools to move along it intentionally. The budget checkpoint is your validation tool. It tells you whether you're in the right range without requiring complete plans. Use it at the end of schematic design for a directional read, and again at the end of design development for a much more precise one. The formal estimate is your locked number, and it happens at one of two specific windows, depending on your project type and how far along you are in the design. And the two-question decision tree tells you which one to reach for right now, wherever you are. And I am kind of excited about all of this because the BuildQuest platform that's coming is you're gonna be able to sit back and let this thing manage it for you. And you can sign up for that at buildquest.co as one of the beta testers. We're probably about 75% through the development, and it's been an interesting process. If you've never developed software before, it's much like designing and building a home, and there's been some rough spots, I gotta admit, but it's because I've been challenging them from a technical standpoint to get what I want. Um, so if this episode helped you, especially if you've been that homeowner sitting in the middle of design, wondering whether you can actually afford your project, send me a message. Instagram, Facebook, email, all in the show notes. I read every one. And if you know someone going through this right now, share this episode with them. This is the conversation they need to be having. Now, coming up in episode 52, we're going to be talking about a work breakdown structure. And once you're in the estimating process, this is the tool that puts you in control of how contractors submit their costs, so you can actually compare bids intelligently instead of guessing. That's what's coming up next. All right, everybody. That's what I have for you today. We're deep into the world of estimating and contractors. And as always, my mission really is to enlighten, empower, and protect. I'm Bill Reed with the Awakened Homeowner. Now let's go make it happen.